You're a startup founder. You think your product is amazing and feel like more people should be buying, but the road is long and slow. It feels like you're stuck. There's always one thing I ask startup founders. Have you talked to your customers? They almost always say, heck yes, we talk to our customers all the time. But what I find is they're either selling or trying to improve their product. These are not customer-focused conversations. If we can get curious about our customers, then we can uncover critical insights that will help us build to the next round. I'm Anna Firmenov, and welcome to Building with Buyers, a show about startup growth where I'll explore how customers help startups build to the next round.
You're going to ask me that when the countdown is done. I'll take this part out, or maybe I'll leave it in. Who knows?
I just realized we have the same glasses.
We do?
Look at that. Pretty close.
Oh, wow, we do.
Pretty close,
You have good style.
I have to say the same for you. You have good style.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So Tommy Walker has joined me in my studio. He has his own studio. It's called The Content Studio, but you have joined me in my studio today. And The Content Studio is a content marketing consultancy focused on creating, developing, and improving content programs for growth stage B2B startups and enterprises. Is there a specific industry you love? Is there a specific stage you love? Tell me a little bit more.
Yeah. So I'm really into the companies in the hypergrowth area. Primarily, I've been in fintech, I've been in, e-commerce. I love MarTech in particular. And that's really a lot of where I focus. But I also do some sales tech and some MarTech with one of my big clients right now. So
awesome.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. And I really love that hypergrowth phase, that chaotic energy that comes with a startup moving from startup to scale up.
Yeah. Is that like Series B, Series C?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, right around there. Series B, Series C. There's what I love about that energy is that there's such a lot of raw mass to work with. There's a lot of really good clay.
Not Clay the company.
No, not Clay the company.
Actual clay.
Actual clay. A lot of good stuff to mold. Lots of talent to mold. Lots of systems to put together. My experience, I was at Shopify when it was in scale up mode, right? Super hyper growth phase. Yeah. We could talk about that, but when I was there, we went from I was employee 14 in the Plus division over to 315 by the time I left, and it was right around 2 years. And it was just that level of growth was just so much fun and chaotic to be a part of. But also now in my consultancy, being able to go, let's create some systems to contain this, and not even contain it, but harness it is really the better word. And then channel all of that into the market. I think that's one of the most fun things. And then with enterprises, when I work with enterprises, it's the same type of thing where it's that's more untangling a bowl of spaghetti than it is than bringing shape. But the principles are a lot of the same stuff, and it really helps everybody focus. And that's what I love about it. That's what I love about this work.
I like the image of untangling a bowl of spaghetti. I had to do that yesterday when I was making udon noodles, and then it gets sticky, and they get kind of tangled. So I like that. Normally, I'm exploring the role that customers play in helping companies build to their next level of growth. That's what I talk about a lot on the show. But lately, and after talking to you, this is kind of the second time that we're talking about this thing I want to discuss in this episode. I've been really intrigued by state of the reports, state of the X report, state of the search, SEO, whatever report. State of the, I don't know. There's plenty of state of the podcasting report.
Podcasting, yeah.
Yeah, state of that. You could do state of the anything report. Yep. I think it's really smart way to create really good content. And when I think about really good content, we'll talk about how you think about creating really good content because I'm curious too. But John Bonini, who talks a lot about content creation and how to approach it strategically and what should you be thinking about. He talks about original thinking, original research, and community engagement, getting people to become part of your content so that they're engaged, more people find out about this stuff, right? And so I've talked about this a bit on the show, but with you, I'd love to first. Can you tell me what you think makes really good content? Like, what's your approach when you're working with these hyper growth companies?
Yeah. So I actually have codified this. So when I was running my show, my first question would be, tell me about your content marketing philosophy and how has it evolved over time, right? Like I think about this on a very deep philosophical level because I think that a lot of people I've talked to are like, oh, it's just content. And it's like, no, 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 no. Like words and images and movies and TV, like all of this stuff has been like, a lot of it becomes part of our identity in some ways. So I think a lot of times we sell ourselves short on the idea of just content, right? It's never just content. I've got parts of my soul that have been written by other people whose ideologies I aligned with them. And there's just been game-changing stuff, right?
I just want to mention the companies that are saying it in that way, like, oh, we just need to create content. Like that just needs to be part of our strategy. Just create some content, please. That doesn't fly anymore, right?
No, and well, it's not even so much as the companies as it is the individual contributors that everybody's going to work for a company who phones it in or whatever. But like, it's the individual contributors that I'm like, ooh, I hate when you say that because it means that you're doing it for a paycheck and not realizing your own potential or responsibility.
That's actually what Brendan said too, that there are so many people out there that they don't realize how much what they're saying hurts the rest of the folks that are trying to put out great work.
Yep. I have a philosophy and it revolves around 3 axioms. The first one is a solid premise will get you 80% of the way there. The second is content is a form of social currency. And the third is decisions are made in Slack. So if we unpack those, a solid premise will get you 80% of the way there. Like people are forgiving for good ideas that are not as well executed as they could be. As long as the premise is really totally understandable, that's where the foundation of it all is, right? If I said to you, this is the story of 7 strangers picked to live in a house, have their lives taped, work together, and I don't remember the rest of it. But do you have an idea of what it is that I'm talking about? Right?
Yes.
Or we have master bakers come in and create, cakes, and we're trying to figure out if it's real or
fake.
Is it cake, right? Like there are a number of different premises for TV shows and movies that it's really easy to grasp onto. And I think as content creators in the B2B space in particular, we don't put a lot of thought into what is the premise of the overall thing that it is that we're trying to build, right? So for me, like one of my shows was we talked to industry-leading content marketing professionals about their content marketing philosophy, process, and pregame before they edit an article live on the stream, right? Really easy, really solid to grasp, something you can tell your friends about, like that. And I think that premise part is like one of the most important things. It gets you 80% of the way there. Content is a form of social currency, and this is how we'll tie it back into the state of conversation, right? Content is a form of social currency. Again, I don't share everything that I like or enjoy with my boss, right? When I was in-house, I wouldn't share every little thing that I thought, right? I share things that are going to make me look a lot more credible or that I'm well-read or that I want to share things with certain people to share my sense of humor. Hey, I'm funny too. I get it. Hey, guys, look. Or I'll share things with people to make myself look smarter or make myself look prettier, right? It's the things we share online are really our form of dress. All we are online are words, avatars, maybe videos, and what we share. And what we curate says a lot about who we are. And I think that as creators, we need to keep that in mind about what does the stuff we create say about the person who's going to share it.
I think that's why solo creators are so good at their craft because they care way more. When you have a company with a bunch of people and you're putting out content, it's like, all right, that's the team, they're going to do it, but it's not you. It's not on you to look a certain way, to leave a certain impression. It's the company, right? So, but what you said earlier about like progress over perfection and about like you have a good idea, it doesn't have to be perfect. I do agree with that. I think that working on your premise and then executing on it, but you don't have to be like super perfect. And
no. I disagree with that.
Oh, you do?
I do disagree with that. I am not a progress over perfection type of person.
Tell me more.
So I graduated from an acting conservatory. I was a classically trained actor for years. Like my teaching lineage goes back to the person who is responsible for changing the way that modern acting is done. I'm like 4 degrees away from that person. And I believe that we need to practice and drill fundamentals constantly. Narrative principles are a thing. They've existed. They're named, and you can train on these individual areas very specifically. Now, when I say a solid premise will get you 80% of the way there, the other 20% is the execution. And I think that what I really dislike about the progress over perfection is that it's also led to, and this is where a big problem in our industry has happened, is it's led to a lot of good enough out there. And my goal when I train and drill on principles and foundational techniques is for my low bar to be higher than everybody else's high bar. Now, I'll be honest, like I do that to a degree, like I may have deluded myself to a certain point of going like, maybe I think I'm better than I actually am. But what I very much dislike the idea of good enough, I will listen to the playback of this podcast afterwards and go like, okay, I'm going to take notes on where I went off the rails, right? And how, you know what I mean? Like I really do believe in mastery to the point where it looks flawless, but there's a lot of bumps along the road. Like Tony Hawk pulls off the 900 and it looks like he did it for the first time and that I could do it too. But what we don't see is the many, many bones he's broken along the way, especially when he's just drilling ollies.
Totally. I think that there's something to be said about like doing something really well and honing your craft. And the thing that's tough I work with early stage startups. And so that's always kind of been my approach. That's like my look and feel too. That's probably why I attract those types of companies. They're like, they see me, they see videos of me. Like I don't have a suit on. I don't have a flashy studio. I'm not Chris Walker, and that's on purpose because I'm trying to like spend more time on what I believe matters more, which is who do I bring on? What's the quality of the conversation, right? Those things matter more. But of course, I can do so much better to reach perfection. There's so much I could be doing. I could be on YouTube. I can have the right lighting. I don't know if my setup is still like since 2020, I've been podcasting. I don't know if my setup is perfect. I've got my computer camera, which to me looks great. And then I've got my microphone. I could probably do way more. But because I work with early stage startups and I think there's a lot of momentum that comes from just get some stuff going, right? It shouldn't be perfect. You shouldn't spend on that perfection stuff because you're experimenting and you're learning. So maybe that's the difference.
Yeah.
With who you work with and who,
Yeah. Well, it's not just that. I mean, for me, it does absolutely. I'm experiencing this right now, that it does work to my detriment. I will be the first person to say, and people I've worked with, I'm a terrible client for that reason. So it does work to my detriment, but I think that it is important. Like, I'm certain that you have, through repetition and through purposeful intent, have done things to improve the quality of your stuff over time. And I think what I see a lot of, at least what I feel anyways, is that I see a lot of folks who are like, I'm okay just not pushing towards something else. It's just volume. It's just producing. Let's not, drill a certain thing. Right. And like,
absolutely.
That's the difference. Right.
Yeah.
I think that's the difference. And that's that. Yes, a solid premise will get you 80% of the way there. That other 20 is going to be the execution.
Totally. Somebody was on the show and she said, what if we thought about our content as if you could just put one thing out there in 1 year, just one thing, right? And this ties back into the state of the report, right? If you could just put one thing out there, what would that be? Now, work on it, right? Because that's going to be the piece that is high quality.
Yep.
And I don't think that companies think about it in that way. Like if you could just create one thing, they're thinking about, what's the next launch? What are the next snippets? What are the next like volume, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So given what we just talked about and like this state of, you actually put together the state of discontent.
Yes.
Discontent.
Dis within parentheses for anybody who's
within parentheses.
Listening.
Yeah. And I'll include a link to that in the show notes. But I'd love to just walk the listener through these steps because we walked through it together. I was super curious, like, how do you get this done? I see the state of, I actually want to first start off by talking about how cool just the general idea of like putting something like this together. You have original thinking in there. It's your point of view that you thread through this report. You've got the original research, which is like, what questions are you going to ask people? Who do you then ask to fill out the survey to get the answers? And you're also engaging, if you go to people that care about the topic, you can engage them. They can share this out. So it's just brilliant to me. So let's talk, anything else you'd want to add about like what makes this a great idea?
Yeah. So I want to take it back to those 3 axioms for a moment here because that all ties together. Like doing the state of discontent report was sort of a culmination of everything I believe. It was everything that I believe all in one spot. And it was like that if you could create one piece of content a year, that's absolutely, it was like it encompassed everything that I believe in it. I was firing on all cylinders when we were creating it too. So if a solid premise will get you 80% of the way there, content is a form of social currency and decisions are made in Slack, right? When we were doing the report, where do you want to start with that? Because
well, first, like the report itself is really like the state of discontent around what's going on in the content world. People are frustrated. People are feeling different things, right? We're trying to set a high bar, but meeting the low bar.
Yeah.
Why is that happening? How is AI impacting the content that we're putting out? Like that was really the goal. What's happening in your company on the content teams you're working on?
Yeah.
Like that was the goal, was to bring stuff to light. So I wanted to give that background first, but like, how did you come up with the order of questions and like the phrasing of questions? Because I think one of the hardest things, you can have a survey and you can ask people questions, but to think thoughtfully about the order of questions, the phrasing of questions, the relationship between questions, like help me understand how you thoughtfully did this in a way that kicks off the narrative that you're already like your perspective on things.
Cool. So to get to the questions, we have to actually zoom back, right? We have to go back to the very origin of the thing. So I spent a lot of time, I pay attention to this space for like all day long. It's what I do. I enjoy it too much. And what I was noticing around the earlier parts of last year was that there was this general malaise about what was happening in our space, right? There was conversations about the economy happening over here and AI happening over here and other people talking about the playbook is dead over here. And even Audience Plus had a conference called Golden Hour. It was a 1-day event that my entire LinkedIn feed was there. It was very weird seeing everybody there in person. But the whole premise of that was the playbook is dead, right? And things are evolving and things are changing. And where are we going? Having been in this space for such a long time, I was like, this needs to be quantified somehow. Like I want to bring all this together. But I wasn't going to do the thing that I've seen done and I have done in the past, which is let me just put together a survey and see what happens. So I wanted to validate the idea first, right? I reached out to a handful of different people who I would know help distribute the survey and then eventually the report and said, hey, who also had the attention of the audiences that I wanted to get, right? And I said, hey, does this sound like a cool premise? Like, how would you, what would you want to do here? And they were like, yeah, that sounds really cool. So I tapped into their communities. We had a handful of questions that we were trying to seed with, but the question was like, what do you want to know, community? What do you want to know about what's happening in our space right now? Not just on this, like, are you using AI right now? Or what are your problems with distribution? But like, why do you think people are feeling the way that they're feeling, right? Or are you feeling this? Or are you not, right? And can we validate this idea of my boss doesn't get it, or clients aren't willing to da-da-da-da-da, right? Like all of these little anecdotes that we hear, I was like, I'm kind of like just tired of hearing about it out in the ether. Let's put it all together. So I found, I think, 5 different people or different companies or people that would help distribute this and get the word out about it. I worked with Rob Carpenter, who is fantastic. He got a lot of folks to also sign on for distribution, which was great. So shout out to Rob. I worked with the partners to go like, okay, what are the types of questions that we want to ask? And we had like a list of 30. And I remember very clearly going, someone saying, we can't have 30 questions. I'm like, no, you're right. But like, and they're like, you have to pare it down to like 13. I'm like, well, we can't get what we need in 13 questions. So we had to do it in 21. But then we had about 25, actually, I think is what we ended up doing. But I said, it's not questions. Like a lot of surveys are call and response. And we can't do that. We're never going to get the data that we need, especially if we're going to be talking about things that are on this emotional level. We're never going to get people in that phase where they're willing to admit things like, how often do you do audience research?
Or like, are you creatively fulfilled?
Right.
Like, do you feel like that's like, oh man.
We'll get there. Yeah. So the idea when it came to putting the questions together was, I think, in narrative arcs. Like I said, I was a trained actor. I've been studying storytelling for 30 years now. And I knew that if we were going to get people to commit to taking this survey, we had to kick off a narrative in their head, and we had to have our questions and the way that you would interact with those questions be done in a meaningful type of way. So the way that we started to structure the questions is the first 8 were like, tell us about how many people are in your company and what industry do you work in, and like all of your grounding questions, right?
The usual.
Yeah. The usual. How long have you been doing this for, et cetera, et cetera. And then we got to question number 8. And question number 8 was, are you satisfied with where you are in your career? By the time we got to that point, my hypothesis was, and it turned out to be true, is that if you're 8 questions deep, you're not going to abandon on that 8th question. And it's like, okay, yeah, we're lulled into this sense of false security. And this was the idea, right? Lull people into a sense of false security, ask a really confronting question, and then know the intensity of the questions and when to back off and when to start pulling forward to get that type of data that we were looking for. So some of the questions were like, are you creatively fulfilled, right? Not just are you satisfied with where you are in your career, but are you creatively fulfilled? How confident are you that people would recognize your content on voice and tone alone? How often are you doing your audience research? And that question wasn't just phrased, how often are you doing your audience research? It was, be honest. How often are you doing your audience research? And that came a little bit further on in the survey. And it's like, by the time you get to that point, it's kind of like I wanted it to be coming from a place of emotional honesty from people.
You're making people like have that tension.
Well,
right?
And I told my partners very early on, I said, I want people to have a kind of an existential crisis by the time they're done with this thing. It was very much a stated thing.
Thanks, Tommy.
Yeah, well, but the thing was, and on the other side of it, right, this is how I knew it was starting to hit. On the other side of it, there were people who were saying like, this was so cathartic. Thank you for giving me a place to, say what I felt like I needed to say. Someone went so far, and this is shout out to Stephanie Travato here. She said, this is the first time I felt like a survey ever really cared about what it was I had to say.
Yeah.
Right.
I think surveys should do that. I think especially if you're creating a state of the report, I think that is really the goal. That's the gold mine right there. If you have people feeling like, oh my gosh, it wasn't just a survey, it was a therapy session,
it
right?
Was. Yeah.
So I think that's really powerful.
Hey, it's Anna, host of Building with Buyers. I started the show because I found that customers play such an important role in business growth, but they're often overlooked. We're so focused on net new, but the thing that makes you unique is not your product. There are so many companies solving the same problem, and they have customers too. The thing that makes you unique is your superfan customers. That's your moat. Most positioning and messaging is guesswork. I'm a customer insights and strategy advisor, and I help my clients by interviewing their customer superfans and translating those insights into clear and compelling positioning and messaging that specific people care about. So you get deeper engagement with customers and prospects, increased inbound to demos, better sales conversations, increased word of mouth, and closed deals. If you're done guessing, stumbling along, and want to be more customer obsessed, reach out. I'd love to help. And now back to the episode.
When we spoke before, we kind of went through step by step. I want to just quickly summarize the steps so that the listener sort of has something that's organized. Because I jumped right in and I was like, how do you create that narrative and correlate questions? But really, it starts with developing the premise. So that's where it all begins. You said it can't just be call and response. Like, you really need to have a premise. You are hearing things, right? You're getting insights from conversations you're having. People are disgruntled. And so you're developing that premise. Then the other thing that you mentioned was like, who's going to help me distribute this thing out so I can get the data? You can't just do it all yourself, because that's so. I actually did some research. I did it. I did everything that you would tell me, don't do that, Anna. I did. I made some mistakes. Maybe like 6 months or 1 year ago, I sent out a survey to CMOs and VPs of marketing, and I asked them like, what's your biggest challenge right now? It was just 5 questions, I think. It was like very, very short. 40 or 50 people filled it out. And so I was able to see like, wow, these are the main challenges. But it didn't leave people with like, I felt that was like so cathartic. No, it was just like a call and response. So I did the thing. So I did it.
You're not alone.
And I don't feel like I am alone.
No.
Like people, that's how people treat this stuff. The state of the is where the good stuff comes out. It's
Should
where,
be.
you know, like I feel like this is just so worthwhile for creating this point of view, for creating this narrative. And so, okay, coming back to the steps. Who will help me distribute this thing out, right? They also validate the idea, like, is this interesting to you? Yes, it's interesting to me. Okay, great. It's not just you, right, saying, I want to do this.
It should also be made a point here, too. The state of the discontent report was actually audience sourced. Somebody else came up with the idea, and it sounded so cool. It was like, you know, we're trying to quantify the malaise, but as we were working with our partners to say, like, hey, will you distribute this? And then they started to test the idea within their own communities and whatnot. Someone else came up with state of the discontent report. And I was like, oh, yeah, perfect.
Because you could have called it state of content.
Right.
The state of content.
But there's like a billion state of content reports.
Totally. That gets my wheels turning.
So that one clever little play on words, like that one little parentheses made it like, oh, this is very clear what this is about.
Yeah.
I love that. And it creates such a high signal.
I thought you used ChatGPT to come up with titles. No. Okay, so then I think it's like, then you want to have like, well, what's your goal? Maybe that should come first. Like, what's your goal with this report? And the goal with this report for you, for others, is customer acquisition, right? I mean, of course you have a goal of, this is interesting research, but what else? Like, there's other reasons you're doing this. And so the end goal of customer acquisition was really the goal. Yeah. And so you have a list of people that answered the questions in a certain way. And now you are able to qualify leads, which I think is actually pretty brilliant.
Yeah. Step 1 in this case is actually, if we go way back, step 1 is failure. So I run a cohort called Content Theory, and I teach a ton of stuff. We talk about the science, philosophy, and psychology of category-defining content programs. And I've created category-defining content programs, so I feel like I'm qualified to say that. And what I didn't do when I went to teach the first survey, or cohort rather, was run through my entire process. So part of the idea of like, hey, let's do this type of report was to go, can I validate the things that I'm talking about in my course? Can I become my own case study on showing how this stuff works? So yes, I teach a lot of the whole, like, you know, get your validation first, validate your idea, work with the community, work with your distributors, have people, you know, co-develop the questions with you, share resources, et cetera, et cetera.
Oh, so you teach this? Like, you're an expert on this.
Yeah.
That's why it's so good.
Yeah. So I needed to test it out for myself. So after failing on that first real launch, not failing. I mean, I had people in there. I just didn't pack the seats the way that I wanted to. Then I was like, okay, well, I got to come up with something to sort of prove that. The thing about the State of Discontent report is that all of the questions, they all map to things that I teach. So like, how often do you do audience research, for example? If people were saying not nearly enough, which was the number one response, it's like, and then why is that? Right? Well, it's not a priority, or we don't have a framework, or, whatever. I'm like, well, I have an 8-layer market research process that I teach. Right? So by the time I get to the end of this survey, there's like a hyper segmented list of people where I know exactly how these answers have been, given. Have I used that hyper segmentation to the best of my ability? No, I'm a single person, but it's there if I wanted to. But yeah, the idea was overall, let's first validate this stuff. And then if somebody comes in, if they've taken the report and they go through the funnel that I've created on the other side, that's proof that the stuff I'm talking about is working.
Totally. You're a case study to the work that you do.
You are a case study in the making.
Yeah.
Right? Like it becomes very difficult to deny that the stuff works if you've bought as a result of being a part of it.
Totally. Perfect. Okay. Then once we understand we have this goal, we're developing this premise, we are getting other folks on board to help distribute.
Mm-hmm.
You ask your partners, what do you want to know? I think you mentioned that.
Yeah.
And so that helps to kind of cover some other bases maybe that you didn't cover originally. And then you cut down the questions.
Yeah.
Not too much.
Yeah. And the point of the questions too, and this was something that if it was not going to be call and response, I wasn't necessarily looking for the answers to each question. I wanted to see how each question would correlate with another. So I wasn't thinking in terms of individual questions so much as it was, what are the vectors of this survey? So how are things going to correlate? So everything tying back to audience research, or a good portion of it tying back to audience research. So how bought in do you feel like your leadership is to your content marketing program? What's your relationship like with your stakeholders? How well do you collaborate? Okay, how often do you do your audience research? Well, we found that in this, like, cognitively just seems to make sense. The more often people did their audience research, the more bought in their leadership program, or their leadership was into their content program. The qualitative.
So there's correlations there that you found. That's cool.
Yeah. And when we were designing the questions, like, the reason why I couldn't cut it down past a certain point was I knew I wasn't going to get those correlations if I didn't have those vectors. They're not even questions to me, they're vectors, because I'm looking for the triangulation between certain things. Okay, so what's the relationship between audience research, voice and tone, and creative satisfaction? How can I start to make these connections across the board and go like, hey, there are some certain foundational problems here that we need to address, that like a lot of the stuff that we might be complaining about, these are correlations, not causations, but like, I'll let you draw your own inferences too when we start looking at what people are scared about and how certain things start to come about. So if there's a lot of correlation between people not doing their audience research nearly enough and leadership not doing their getting buy-in, I can't say that that's directionally related, because there are a lot of other circumstances, like, the industry that you're in and the types of people that you're working with, or all of that. But I do know that when you've done a good amount of audience research, you have a lot better of a chance of making defensible cases for your content strategy.
That's really the point, I think, of research, is like, can you do the research, get to the insights, but also back it up?
Right.
Because no one's it's great that you think that these are insights, but can you back it up? I think that's like something that happens with my work, the work that I do. Like, they want the quotes. Who said that? Right. How many people said that?
Right.
That's where it's really important to back it up.
Well, and I know this because it's the 8-layer market research process I teach, is that a lot of, and I've done this, I've made this mistake many, many times, but it's going to a boss or a leader or client, right? Or somebody, whoever's signing the checks, and going like, hey, I have this really great idea for a strategy. And they're like, okay, how do you know that's going to work? And it's like vibes. Right. I just know. I just know it's going to work because I'm paying attention to what people are saying in the market. Well, can you quantify that? Can you back it up? What's the return on this going to be? And for me, I'm going like, okay, but does your audience research include what your distribution touch points are going to be like? And the thing is, what ends up happening is that you mentioned Brennan, he talks about spreadsheet SEO. That's what everybody ends up defaulting back into, because that's the one thing where you can say, if we write this post and we rank number one, here's the potential search that or potential traffic we might be able to get.
Yeah, that's what he was so pissed about, right? He's like, people are putting out this crap content around this technical, mechanical. That's not how it's going to work, guys.
Right. Yeah. But the thing is as individual contributors, I always try to bring it back to like, hey, let's take responsibility for this. If you're not able to say to a boss or a leader of whoever's signing the checks, again, I'm just going to keep saying that. If you're not able to say to whoever's signing the checks, here's where we're going to put it. Here's why we think it's going to work. Here's how we're hedging our bets against failure. And I learned this when I was at QuickBooks, because it was another team that kind of brought up the whole idea of validating your distribution first, right? I didn't come up with that on my own. They came up with this. It was like, okay, if we're going to spend $10,000 on a report, right? $10,000 on some sort of state of report, you don't want to build this thing and then bring it to potential distributors and say, will you distribute this? You're going to waste so much time on the back end that the report itself might not even be relevant anymore.
Great point.
But if you're validating and you're securing your distribution first, what they would do is they'd use a tool called Pitchbox, and they would send out a mass blast of very targeted news outlets and bloggers and people with reach and say, hey, here are 3 different premises that we're thinking about. Which one of these do you think will land with your audience? And they'd have a threshold for the amount of people that they would get secured. And then only once when a certain pitch hit that threshold, that's what they went in on. Because then they could say, yeah, we're going to spend 10 grand on this, but with the amount of impressions we're going to get across all of these different surfaces, with the amount of coverage that will get downstream from that, because here are all the people who tend to quote these bigger sources that we're on, like we're going to get this much more of a return. They could quantify that and not just go, hey, we need to create a state of report and let's put it out there and see what happens. It's like, no. We have a lot of the distribution locked down, and we have a pretty solid idea of what this investment's going to look like.
How many people did you have fill it out?
So we had 5 different distributors and 545 responses.
Nice. Okay.
With an average of a 47% completion rate and a 21-minute completion time.
Nice.
So like people were spending time with it.
Yeah. I love that.
And that came down to the narrative flow. Yeah.
Typeform is what you use to collect information. Okay. I love this. I think you also mentioned the last time we met that you used video to if people didn't want to fill something out, you can record a quick video if you don't want to type this. So that's a really nice.
There were, I think, 3 or 4 major checkpoints in there where it was like a long form response. And I knew that some of these questions, I knew going into it. Like I said, I told my partners, like, hey, I kind of want people to have an existential crisis by the time they're done. Like I said it out loud. I also knew that it was at a certain point, it was going to be an emotionally taxing type survey. So at the long form responses, that's usually where I check out as a person, because I'm like, I've already been putting a lot of effort into this, and Typeform does a great job of like making it interactive in all sorts of different ways. So we were like, order the questions here and do sliders and stars over here. And like, we could have done multi-select for every single one of them, but like, that's not fun. So shout out to Typeform for having the type of user experience that they have. But when it came to those longer questions, I didn't want drop off. So most of the questions were still answered with a long form text, but there were people who checked in using video ask and going like, hey, let me just freestyle on this right now. And having that as an option made it like I got to see people's faces when they were responding, which was really, really cool.
That's really cool. All right. I think I covered everything that you did.
Except for the creation of the damn thing. On the other side of it, right?
Tell me about that.
So we had all sorts of, it took me about a month to figure out what we were actually going to do to present the data, because it wasn't this call and response type survey, or I didn't want it to be a call and response type report. I had to figure out what to do with that. So we had all of these correlations, but I was like, how do we organize this information in a way that's going to make people make sense? The long story is we ended up with a 220-page report, right? Which is crazy on its own, but it followed a narrative structure or not even a narrative structure, but it follows one of the principles that I teach, which I got from Robert McKee, author of a book called The Story. Highly recommend. And it was organized by the 3 layers of conflict. So in Story, the 3 layers of conflict are extrapersonal conflict, things that are happening out in the world that are completely outside of our control. So think like forces of nature, economy, roles in society, etc. The next layer down is personal conflict. So relationships with bosses, spouses, friends, enemies, right? What are those conflicts? And then the inner conflict, right? So relationship with mind, body, soul, or in our case, like creativity, relationship with career and whatnot. And once that all clicked into place, and I said, this is another one of those things that I teach. Why didn't I think about how to put it all together? Then it all really clicked. And then it was like, okay, well, what are the conditions out in the world right now that are bothering people? And it was like economy, job loss, AI was a big one. Okay, and now and then the big middle of the report was how bought in is your leadership to content marketing, right? And then that last section was about the relationship with creativity. Are you creatively fulfilled? Yes. No, it's complicated. Lots of it's complicated in there. So organizing the information that way made it easy to go from seeing what the state of everything was down to what it's like on the personal level. It created this journey for somebody reading through it. And I got plenty of, again, this was the narrative stuff paying off. I got lots of reports on the other side of it going like, that was a long report and I can't believe I didn't spend more time with it. I wanted it to be longer.
Yeah, I really love that, how you kind of go macro level, what's going on. And then it's like, well, relationship with your team, with your boss, right? And then it goes into like the inner conflict stuff. I think that's really smart.
Yep.
Awesome. Who created this report? Who did you work with?
I worked with my guy, Hassan Khalid, who was the designer.
Okay. You worked with your designer. Cool.
I did a lot of the writing myself, but I also had Bonnie Kaur involved with it. I'm going to not name everybody that was involved.
Yeah.
Rob Carpenter. There were a handful of people. There was Rob Carpenter, who helped get the distribution going with a lot of folks, not the main distributors, but like a lot of the seeding through social media. And who else? Oh, they're credited in the report.
I know there's like people that you haven't mentioned, but it's just good to know you're thinking about who's going to design this thing and also who's going to help me distribute this thing, right? So those are like really important pieces of it. Awesome. Tommy, this was really like the thing I wanted to get out in this episode and leave because I thought this was really interesting and smart, and the way that you just like did this from start to finish. So I wanted to share that in this episode. So I appreciate you for joining me. If you want to find Tommy, he is on LinkedIn, and it's Tommy is my name. That's right. Very creative. No wonder you're so creative, and I've been an actor. I'm not surprised. The Content Studio is thecontentstudio.com. So you can just go there. And the State of Discontent report, I will share it as a link in the show notes. And I thank you once more, Tommy. Thanks for going over time. I appreciate you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Building with Buyers. New episodes drop weekly, so make sure you're following wherever you get your podcasts. You can find me on LinkedIn, Anna Furmanov. Visit my website to learn more about how to turn customer insights into positioning and messaging your buyers will understand. FurmanovMarketing.com. And don't forget to leave a review if you're loving the show.